Yes, run. A board gamer's strength flows from the Force. Beware the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. Dominate your destiny at will, as it did Paul's apprentice.
Wait. Is the dark side stronger?
No, but it is more seductive.
But tell me, why can't we be wrench?
No. There is no why. Nothing more will I teach you today.
There's something not quite right here.
Dominion of evil it is. In you must go.
Back in 2011, popular glossmongers Fantasy Flight announced they'd acquired the Star Wars license, and they said they were working on 2 games. The first was the excellent, if a bit expensive, X-Wing miniatures game. This is the second, Star Wars the card game, and it's
excellent, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure it is.
This game is heavy with art, with ideas, with passion fitting the Star Wars universe. Come and look at this. Players in Star Wars, the card game, take control of either the light side or the dark in a deadly struggle. You will be building not 1, but 2 decks.
Or using the pre-prepared decks from the box?
Yes, or using the pre-prepared decks from the box. One of these decks will be full of the units and events you will deploy into this struggle. The other will be full of objectives, such as Imperial High Command or the Endor Gambit.
But Star Wars the card game is not some pitched battle, rather it's a desperately unfair race. The light side wins by blowing up just 3 dark side objectives, but the dark side wins via this Death Star tracker, which is cool but thematically kind of nonsensical. Every single turn the dark side will advance it 1 slot, and every time they blow up a light side objectives, they will jerk this tracker forward a number of spaces equal to the number of objectives they've blown up so far. About my favourite thing about Star Wars the card game is that it does at least capture the desperation and the speed of the films. This paciness defines the entire game. On every single turn you'll draw all the way up to 6 cards, and a lot of these will be units that you can immediately pay for because these objectives you start the game with already allow you to pay for things. And on that same turn you'll allow that cinematic lineup of vehicles and Jedis and droids and soldiers to attack the opponent's objectives.
Because you always draw back up to 6 cards, Star Wars is forever coaxing you into using all of them. However, when you send troops forward into a battle, an edge battle begins, in which you can bid with the cards in your hand for their Force symbols, potentially winning you the edge battle and getting you the drop on your opponents, in a theatrical Star Wars fashion. But also, some of these cards can be fate cards, changing the battle, and should you win the edge battle, your troops won't merely count for their black symbols, but also the white ones. When it is best to deploy brute force, and when is it best to win individual battles? It is an intriguing dilemma.
Yes, which is cool, but there's actually yet another mechanic in Star Wars that lets you squeeze more tactics out of this flimsy little deck of yours. You can choose at the end of your turn to commit units to the Force, and that sends them off doing Forcey things. And what that means is that you can flip the balance of the Force, which is a cardboard token just like it is in the Star Wars movies. And that's actually great, because if the light side has the Force, they get to damage a dark side objective for free every turn, and if it's the dark side, then they get to advance the Death Star clicker token, just like in Star Wars, the scene where Darth Vader advances the clicker token. But the problem is that if you do Force activate a unit, then while their Force points go to you for the Force struggle, they become more tired every time you send them into battle, so you actually end up weakening your military. Which is clever, but it's just all a bit... Look, do you want some tea?
Oh, yes, please.
Alright. So, some words on living card games. Fantasy Flight must have released about 6 of these by now, all covering the same format. which is that they release one of these big starter kits with hundreds of cards, something you can play tons of games of with lots of variety right out of the box, and then they release set monthly expansions of cards, so it's not collectible because you know exactly what you're getting every month. They've done this for Lord of the Rings, they've done this for Warhammer and Game of Thrones and Call of Cthulhu, and something else I can't remember. And yet they're still kind of a risky prospect if you're thinking about buying one. Let me put it to you this way, most of the people I know who bought one of these starter kits end up just owning it and playing it and going, that was fun, but then never really getting into the expansion and the deck building. At that point, you're probably better off buying a board game. That said, if you do really get into it and you and your friends do love it, and you want to buy all the decks and build big monster decks and use them and just hit each other with them, then what's going to happen is you're going to end up dropping £190 every single year, even after you've bought the starter kit. You have to think of this as more like a hobby, and at £190, aren't you better off buying 5 board games? Well, maybe, you have to decide. And the thing is, there are 2 living card games that Fantasy Flight have made that have really impressed me. The first is the Lord of the Rings one. It's actually cooperative. Just you or up to 4 players all join in and you have these magical adventures where one of you are the hobbits and you drive forward and some of you are the warriors, and you can build your decks and you don't have to play with warriors, or you can play with people who all just have a lot of book learning, whatever you want. But the best thing about that is you can build your decks together. Now, the other one, you know, Lord of the Rings is really innovative, but the other one that I really like is Netrunner, which actually originally came out in the 90s. Android Netrunner is a game where one player is a corporation, another is a hacker. It's really, really good. We've actually had our review of it ready for ages, and we're just waiting until it's back in print for us to release it. Now that...
Is the tea ready yet?
Yeah, coming. So, is the Star Wars LCG a third good living card game?
Yes.
You're not having your tea.
Of course they should buy this living card game. Look how clever this is. A trench run card allowing players to attack the Death Star token as if it were another objective. And Han Solo is in the box somewhere, I think.
What? Okay, no, look. The heart of any turn-based table game is difficult decisions. It's making good calls and not, bad calls. Star Wars really struggles to offer those thrills because the game changes so fast and there's so much information you don't have that it's almost impossible to tell not just whether you've made a good call, but what a good call would look like. I mean, okay, let's say you're the dark side player and you've put a nice defensive force down and you're not worried about me because I only have one X-Wing and a Wookiee, and that's not much to worry about. But, okay, right, so my turn begins with me playing a heavy blaster emplacement, and I focus that to just shoot one of your people. Well, that's not so bad, that's done. I'll play a secret informant, we'll get to her later, and some battlefield engineers, which, when I send the battlefield engineers and the secret informant into battle, the heavy blaster's recharged. I can use it again to shoot you again. And then in the edge battle, I play 2 Heat of Battle fake cards. Secret Informant doubles their power. All of these are cards that you didn't even know existed, let alone that I was going to play, that I was holding them, and suddenly your entire force is annihilated before I've even attacked. What could you have done to stop that? Well, probably nothing. Sorry, pal. And it's not just that the occasional turn is like this. Every card will see players slapping units down and using them. And clearly this is a smart game. Clearly players are going to take this to tournaments and they're going to do incredible things with these cards. But that's not my point. My point is that all too often, especially to new players, the game feels like one where you play the units in your hand and you use the units on the table. That changes everything. Your opponent does the same. And you know what's awful, actually? At the end of your opponent's turn, you'll be facing a whole new battlefield, and only then you'll have to look at the battlefield. On your turn, you'll have to process it. You'll draw 6 new cards. You'll look at those cards. You'll figure out what to do with them. And you know what? That's slow. Do you see? Games should allow you to make your decisions while your opponent is taking your turn, not stop. Start again. Stop. Okay, you can play again.
But it has Princess Leia. It is not as chaotic as you suppose. As you play game after game, you will develop an understanding of the statistical probabilities of the dark side. You will understand when to be aggressive, when to be defensive, what to expect from the different factions. You simply have to learn by doing.
What? No, look, why should we have to work to force the game out from these cards. Are you saying that in addition to buying the set and finding the friends that are into deck building and then buying more cards, we have to play and play and play again until averages and factions all start to coalesce in our mind into a sort of hallucinatory game that isn't visible initially, but as you learn odds and random chance? No, and for what? For why? For intellectual property that's 35 years old already?
But it has Boba Fett.
Shut up! No, okay, look, we can't recommend this one. Star Wars is a fine game, and it's very, very pretty, but it suffers from the same disease as so many other collectible card games, which is that the idea of making money and the theme seems to have come first, and the game feels like something that someone invented at their desk at work. You know, games are the real thing or they're not. They bring you or your friends closer together, or they just exist to separate you from your cash. And this is not the real thing.
I've never heard somebody talk so passionately about board games.
What?
Are you single?